The papaya celebration turned sour before the champagne even dried. Two orange cars touched where no teammates should. A world champion team, but a divided garage. And Oscar Piastri, the calm prodigy, finally lost his patience. The moment of contact between Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris was measured in tenths of a second, yet its consequences have echoed through every corner of the McLaren organization. What began as a brilliant launch by Norris quickly turned into a chain reaction of split-second decisions that none of the engineers could fully anticipate. Off the line, both McLarens were flawless, their traction clean, their gear changes synchronized like a rehearsed ballet. But by turn 3, everything changed. Norris had already swept past Antonelli and was lining himself up for a daring move on his teammate. It was the kind of instinctive aggression that has made him a star: fast, brave, relentless. Only this time, the calculation went awry. A small brush with Verstappen's rear wheel unsettled the balance of his car, sending it drifting just wide enough to clip the side of Piastri's MCL39. No crash, no damage, but a wound nonetheless, invisible to the eye yet impossible to ignore. The stewards saw it as nothing more than a racing incident, the kind that happens countless times on the opening lap of a Grand Prix. But inside McLaren, it was far more than that. Within the team's carefully maintained system of internal ethics, their so-called papaya rules, this was a breach of trust. McLaren's first commandment has long been simple: race freely, but never touch each other. It is a creed that has guided the team since its rebirth under Andrea Stella and Zak Brown. For Piastri, that line was sacred, the very foundation of his partnership with Norris. And on that humid Singapore evening, he watched it dissolve before his eyes. His immediate radio message, curt but cutting, was not an outburst, it was a declaration. That was not very teen-like. Those words were the sound of faith breaking. What followed revealed a deeper divide between cockpit and pit wall. When race engineer Tom Stallard responded, his tone was calm, professional, carefully measured. "Lando had to avoid Verstappen. We will review later." It was a corporate response to an emotional wound. Piastri's reply, however, carried none of the restraint he had shown all season. If avoiding means hitting your teammate, that is a pretty bad job avoiding. The message was sharp not in anger but in clarity. It was the voice of a driver who felt the team's neutrality collapsing. In that single sentence, Piastri articulated what many drivers have felt but rarely dared to say, that equality in Formula One often exists only until two cars meet at the same corner. From the outside, McLaren appeared united. But anyone who has worked inside a racing team knows how silence can be louder than argument. Mechanics exchanged quick glances but few words, engineers focused on screens rather than faces. It was not the collision that hurt, both cars survived, but the perception that one of them had been protected by interpretation rather than principle. Norris's talent and popularity have made him McLaren's public face, but within that spotlight lies an unspoken tension. Piastri, methodical and reserved, had built his season on discipline and consistency. To see his own team call the incident typical first-lap racing felt, to him, like a betrayal of that effort. In Formula One, fairness is not a statistic, it is a feeling. And that feeling had vanished. As the race unfolded, the gap between them on track mirrored the gap opening in trust. Norris drove superbly, recovering rhythm and securing a podium finish, while Piastri clawed back to fourth with quiet precision. Yet when they returned to the paddock, their expressions told opposing stories. Norris smiled politely for cameras, trying to diffuse the tension with humor, while Piastri walked straight past the microphones, his focus frozen and his jaw locked. To the public, it looked like professionalism. To those who had lived through these moments before, from Senna and Prost to Hamilton and Rosberg, it looked like the start of something larger, something that no amount of public relations can easily contain. Inside the team debrief, Andrea Stella's words were calm but weighted. He promised analysis, review, understanding. But what engineers cannot measure is trust, and what data cannot display is resentment. Piastri's confidence in the fairness of McLaren's system had been dented, and once that crack appears, it rarely disappears. What makes this problem particularly volatile is its symmetry. Both men are young, fast, and capable of winning a championship. Neither wants to be seen as the second driver in a team that has built its reputation on equality. Each believes he is the rightful spearhead of McLaren's next great era. The collision at turn 3 was merely the spark that illuminated that truth. To the fans, the situation has divided opinion sharply. Many see it as nothing more than hard racing, two exceptional drivers doing what exceptional drivers do. Others view it as the first sign that McLaren's internal peace was always temporary, built on shared success rather than shared understanding. And for a team that prides itself on modern values, that perception matters deeply. Singapore was supposed to showcase McLaren's rebirth. Instead, it revealed its most human flaw. Success does not remove rivalry. It amplifies it. Every Formula One rivalry begins in the garage long before it reaches the track. Inside McLaren's spotless engineering bays, every millimeter of carbon fiber, every line of telemetry, and every whispered instruction tells a story. For months, the team had balanced two distinct driving philosophies: Norris, the intuitive improviser, able to extract pace through instinct and aggression, and Piastri, the precision engineer behind the wheel, a driver who builds speed through consistency and data. Together, they had lifted McLaren to dominance. But in Singapore, those philosophies collided in a way no technical model could predict. The McL39 is a masterpiece born of efficiency and compromise. It is lighter, sharper, and more aerodynamically polished than its predecessor, but its perfection comes with fragility. The car's front suspension geometry gives it extraordinary turn-in response, the kind of immediate steering precision that allows drivers to dance around the apex. Yet that same characteristic can make it volatile in heavy braking zones, especially on rough circuits like Marina Bay. There, the surface punishes stiffness, and the braking loads push the front end into unpredictable oscillations. The car demands absolute confidence. For Norris, it invites opportunity. For Piastri, it demands caution. The technical team knew this duality well. In smooth high-downforce circuits such as Suzuka or Silverstone, the McL39 feels like a scalpel, predictable, obedient, unbeatable. But on street circuits, where braking points are irregular and grip fluctuates, that precision becomes a trap. Norris often compensates with aggression, braking deeper and accepting a more unstable entry. Piastri, however, prefers balance and flow, choosing to preserve momentum through measured control. It is a subtle difference in approach, but in Formula One, subtleties can turn symphony into discord. When two drivers approach the same corner from different philosophies, the room for harmony shrinks to nothing. At turn 3 in Singapore, physics played its merciless hand. The tight radius, the bump under braking, and the narrow margin left by Verstappen's Red Bull combined into the perfect storm. Norris took the inside line with the confidence of a man who trusted the car's bite. But that bite vanished the moment the front tires struck the uneven surface, and with one small correction of steering, the McLaren slid outward by inches, just enough to meet the sidepod of Piastri's car. It was not recklessness, it was mechanics. Yet for all the technical reasons that could explain it, the emotional impact was the same. In Formula One, explanations do not erase consequences. Inside the garage, McLaren's engineers pored over the telemetry in silence. The data confirmed what the eye had seen: minimal contact, low energy, no damage. Yet the emotional damage, the breach of the team's internal equilibrium, was far greater. For weeks, the engineering staff had prided themselves on maintaining perfect parity between both sides of the garage. Every new component, every aerodynamic upgrade, had been distributed equally. But equality in machinery does not guarantee equality in interpretation. When two drivers feel their perspectives are not weighed with the same gravity, even the cleanest data becomes suspect. In that tension between numbers and emotion, McLaren's stability began to falter. Andrea Stella, himself an engineer by trade, understands the fragility of unity. His post-race language was deliberate: "We will review in detail, analytically, and return stronger." He was not only promising a technical debrief, but an emotional recalibration. Stella's greatest challenge was not aerodynamic, it was human. The balance of personalities inside McLaren mirrors the balance of the car itself: finely tuned, high-performing, but sensitive to the smallest disturbance. The collision at turn 3 revealed that sensitivity. It showed that even in an era defined by simulation and precision, emotion remains the most unpredictable variable of all. The mechanical irony of it all is almost poetic. McLaren's own pursuit of perfection may have created the very instability that now threatens it. The MCL39's new suspension design, celebrated for its aerodynamic gains, also sharpened its behavioral edge. In the hands of two world-class drivers, that sharpness became both a weapon and a wedge. Piastri's precision magnifies its fragility, Norris's boldness amplifies its risk. The team's engineering brilliance had delivered the fastest car on the grid, but also a machine that reflects its drivers too accurately. When one side attacks and the other defends, the car itself becomes the mirror of their rivalry. By the time the checkered flag fell over Marina Bay, McLaren had achieved what every team dreams of: another constructors' title, sealed with 6 races to spare. But instead of joy, the atmosphere in the garage felt heavy, muted, and awkwardly polite. The mechanics clapped. The engineers exchanged careful smiles. Yet in the middle of the celebration, two drivers stood apart, each lost in a different silence. Norris, helmet off, tried to appear untroubled, but his expression betrayed uncertainty. Piastri, still behind the visor, walked straight past the cameras without a glance. It was the image of success wrapped in dissonance, a team crowned champions yet fractured within. The first sign that something was truly wrong came not on the podium, but on the radio. As the race ended, Zak Brown's familiar voice came over the intercom, cheerful and rehearsed, ready to congratulate his drivers. Norris responded with thanks and relief. Piastri, on the other hand, disconnected. It was a small gesture, perhaps instinctive, but its symbolism struck immediately. Within minutes, the clip was circulating online, the moment McLaren's usually composed Australian had seemingly switched off not just his radio, but his trust. Fans replayed it again and again, interpreting the silence as rebellion, frustration, or something more permanent. The story was no longer about the constructors' trophy. It was about a young driver refusing to play the role assigned to him. When the broadcast cameras cut to the post-race celebrations, the tension became impossible to ignore. Norris climbed to the podium, his smile broad but tight, while the team staff cheered with less enthusiasm than usual. Down below, Piastri completed his media obligations with the calm precision that has become his signature. But what stood out was his tone, steady, controlled, but stripped of warmth. Asked about the first lap contact, he did not lash out. He simply said, "We will talk internally." To seasoned listeners, those 4 words said everything. In Formula One, "we will talk internally" is not diplomacy. It is warning. McLaren's leadership moved swiftly to contain the narrative. Andrea Stella took to the microphones with his usual composure, calling it a standard racing incident and insisting that both drivers remain free to race. His words were carefully chosen, designed to sound rational yet reassuring. Zak Brown followed with his trademark optimism, describing the season as a triumph of teamwork and trust. Yet both men knew the truth. The harmony that had once been McLaren's proudest achievement had been punctured. The walls of the Papaya garage, once buzzing with collaboration, now hummed with careful restraint. Conversations became shorter. Smiles became formal. Trust, that invisible fuel of championship teams, had evaporated into the humid Singapore night. Meanwhile, the media did what it always does best: it amplified. British tabloids framed the story as a classic battle of temperaments, the passionate, homegrown star versus the quiet, calculating Australian. Australian journalists, in turn, portrayed Piastri as the disciplined craftsman wronged by circumstance. The Spanish press, forever attentive to Formula One's moral theater, drew parallels with Alonso's early years at McLaren, warning that the team might be repeating its own history. Within 24 hours, the constructors' title had become a footnote. The headlines were clear: McLaren divided, Piastri furious, Norris unapologetic. The digital echo chamber turned tension into drama, and drama into narrative inevitability. For Oscar Piastri, this moment marked the beginning of transformation. The driver who had entered Formula One as the embodiment of calm professionalism now revealed a harder edge, not arrogance, but authority. In private, those close to him describe a man whose patience had reached its limit. For 2 seasons, he had followed orders, accepted compromises, and played the team game with near-perfect composure. But champions are not built on compliance alone. What unfolded in Singapore was the awakening of a competitor who realized that greatness demands confrontation as much as cooperation. The Piastri who left Singapore was no longer the quiet apprentice to McLaren's system. He was its challenger. For Norris, the situation carried a different kind of weight. Though blameless in intent, he suddenly found himself cast as the privileged favorite, a narrative that no driver enjoys. Public sympathy shifted unpredictably, and for the first time in years, Lando's easy charm faced scrutiny. The man once celebrated as McLaren's emotional heartbeat now had to defend his judgment, his awareness, and even his leadership. The irony was profound. Both drivers were victims of perception, shaped by the same event into opposing myths. One, the rebel seeking fairness, the other, the golden boy accused of overreach. In reality, both were simply racers caught in the brutal logic of competition. And there, in that contradiction, lay the true dramatic turn. McLaren's great achievement, the balance of youth, speed, and unity, had collapsed into duality. Two drivers, two truths, one team split by the smallest of collisions. The Constructors' Trophy would sit proudly in the case at Woking, gleaming under the lights. But behind that shine would remain the shadow of Singapore, the night when McLaren won the war of numbers but lost the peace of spirit. From that evening on, every lap, every strategy call, and every word spoken over team radio would carry the echo of that unspoken question: are we still one team, or have we become two?